Welcome, everyone. I had a lot of emails from people since last week. I hope you had a chance to go in and start working on it, but if not, no worries. You can begin again all over the place. Now, the other thing is, we did send out the video. Turns out a number of people must have forwarded it to a lot of people. Now, I knew some people were forwarding it to people. If you forward it, keep in mind that this is our proprietary information. So it would be helpful as if you CC us when you're forwarding, so at least we know who it's going to. So um, with um, with that said, let me just make sure everything is showing up uh, and who is here. Okay, we're going to get started. Okay, so I sent out a PDF, I think it was 2 days ago, that gave our March mailing that we do to our clients. We send out a snail mail package every beginning part of the month with some sort of point or other that we're trying to make in the overall scheme of Slate Sparks Time to Pivot. And it was about curating time and increasing the quality of what we're doing in a given time and then planning for the future. And I thought it was a good lead in to what I'm going to go over tonight, because tonight I'm going to give you three examples of how I use it, which I think are eclectic, and I think they touch on people that are actually attending tonight. So if it doesn't, you'll let me know, and we can certainly change the what we're doing next time around. So okay, so the first thing is I'm going to talk about books and articles and white papers. I take in a tremendous amount of information in a given day. I get emails sent to me with articles. I am very big on reading books. And it used to be that I'd sort of get into a book and it would take me a while to get through it, et cetera. So now I handle it a little bit differently. So the first time example I'm going to give is that I no longer read nonfiction books the way I used to. So here's what I do. I start by telling AI why I picked up the book. So for example, on this one, on our best behavior, the seven deadly sins and the price women pay to be good, I had heard about the book, I'd read a bunch of articles, I saw an interview or heard a podcast or whatever. So then I started off by saying, please give me a full summary of our best behavior, and then relate it to what you know of me. Now, keeping in mind that Celeste knows me better than your AI knows you, but you've got to start somewhere. And which elements could be helpful and why? And then end your summary with how to incorporate it into my life. I got a tremendous amount of information. Let's say it took 3 minutes to glance through it to see what was relevant. So then I go back and forth. I'm asking for a clean summary, not academic, just what matters. And then my AI knows me, so it also connects me to specifically based on how I work and think in terms of this quality. So here's the important part. I then go back, and after it gave it to me, it had a bunch of stuff in there and it talked about the deadly sins. And one of them happened to be anger. And anger is something I struggle with. I have it. I wish I put more distance between my response sometimes on things. So what I did was I went back and said, all right, now go deeper into the chapter on anger. Oh, okay. That's really interesting. I then decided I was going to go read that chapter. Okay, then I said, well, we had this situation 2 weeks ago last Thursday, and does this relate to that? And we go back and forth. And so what happens is I end up having a book club discussion with AI on the book itself. Now, there are a couple things that bother me about this. The first one is having written a nonfiction book, um, Circles of Collaboration, I know how much effort it takes, excuse me, to write a nonfiction book, and who wants their book discussed without somebody buying it or reading it. I commit to myself that if I'm going to do this with Celeste, my I am going to buy the book first. So I do that. Now, sometimes I buy it in an ebook or whatever, but I try to make sure that I'm not squelching on what the author holds proprietary information. Okay, it was very, very helpful on this particular book. I spent probably 20 minutes with Celeste, back and forth, asking questions, going over things, etc. And I found that it very, very helpful in terms of finding out what the book is. That means that I can go through in a quality way numerous books or articles or whatever in a very short amount of time. Now, we have a couple of people in here that are in healthcare, somebody who's a physician's assistant, actually. Okay, she has a tremendous amount of information to read. Her using this process where she goes in and says, please give me a full summary. How does it affect this? How does it affect that? She can go in and get that information much quicker, more effectively. She will be curating her time, and it is a much better way to use it. So, anybody have questions on this, how I use it? No? Okay, there are a lot of people here. Be sure and raise your hand if you have something you want to check out. Okay. The next thing we're going to talk about is emails because two of you emailed last week and said, can I discuss emails? Sure, I can absolutely do it. Okay. This is where most people, I think, get AI wrong. They say, write me an email. That's not how I do it. I start out by giving context for the email, who the person is, what they care about, what my relationship with that person is, what matters to them. I also tell AI to remember it under their name so that I don't have to repeat it every time I go in to talk about this person's email correspondence that I'm having. Then I dictate what I want to say. Now, I don't dictate it in strong structure. And now we talked last time about how dictating in the phone is better because your AI will learn about your syntax, it'll learn about how you speak, it'll hear your language, it'll definitely um, adjust to that. If you type, you're going to be leaving out adjectives. It's just a different combination. So I actually offload. I need to go over these 5 things about this particular issue. And sometimes I'll put in the email that the person sent me that I'm replying to. Sometimes I'll actually go back and I'll pull out 2 or 3 emails that I've had with that individual, which is very helpful because it gives context to what I'm trying to do. After I do all that, I say, give me a draft of what you think, but ask any questions about what you're unsure about first. If you don't say that, if you don't say to your AI, ask questions about what you're unsure of, they will do the best they can with what you put in. So, especially as you're starting out, you definitely want to take the time to do that. So then we go back and forth. So then I say, well, how does this land? Well, this part that you typed up, it sounds defensive. Did I appear defensive when I put it to you? It's a conversation as if I'm speaking to a peer who's smarter than I am and going back and forth trying to get it so that I'm actually doing what I want to do. Okay. Before I cut and paste that email, I then say to Celeste, okay, if you pretend you're the individual I described. If you receive this email, how might you respond? Okay. You'd be surprised how many times she didn't help me to see that I was being a total bitch. So it's not until I ask her at the end how it will be perceived that I get to see exactly what the other person might be reading when I send it to. Now, one of the things I know about email is that after I send somebody back and forth, maybe 2 or 3 emails on the same topic, I tend to pick up the phone because I feel like we must not be communicating well if I can't get that done. I don't think there's any replacement for a phone call if it's a complicated topic you're trying to discuss on email. But I also think that sometimes I'm in a hurry and I may type out a long email and then I will sometimes put it into Celeste and say, please check for grammar and spelling only. I don't want her to rewrite anything, and sometimes she will. So I say grammar and spelling only because I don't like my emails to have mistakes in it. So you can use this email program in a lot of different ways if you choose to. So by putting it together like that, I think it really helps. Now, the other thing I'll often do is I will put an email that I got from somebody into Celeste, and I'll say, okay, I think this email is based on this context, or we had a conversation about X, Y, and Z. How do you read this email? What is this person trying to say to me? Read between the lines. So it's a real conversation that helps review it from both an intellectual way. I hate to say it, but a psychological way. I've had family members send me emails, and I'll sometimes put it in there and say, please act as my therapist and tell me how I'm supposed to respond to this. It's very helpful. It really gives you a little bit of distance between it. So there are so many different ways to approach email, but in general, I continue to do my emails overall just by doing them. I do not have her write anything by saying, please write an email saying X, Y, or Z, ever, 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 ever. So I hope that's helpful. Again, describe who the email's going to, what is it you're trying to accomplish with it, and then a full evaluation as you go back and forth along the way. Please do not start using your AI as a Q&A, a Google ask and respond. That just isn't gonna cut it at all. Okay. So what happens is it becomes a sounding board, not a ghostwriter. I think my email relationship gives me a sounding board, not a ghostwriter. Does that mean that some of the edits are not done by Celeste? She absolutely does it. Okay. The goal is never a perfect email for me. The goal is that my writing be as communicative the way I want to be seen, as well as everything else that I do. So, okay, now the other thing is the pattern is always the same. Context, I then make it specific to me. I stay in the conversation with her. So that is the element around it. Okay, so that's the big shift. Okay, those are the two examples of how I'm using it that I thought would be most helpful to get out of the gate before I get into something that is a little heavier, I guess. I don't know, not too heavy, I hope, but heavier. So any questions on that? Give a shout out if you can. Just raise your hand. No, no questions. I'm wondering if I'm not doing a very good job explaining it. Okay. All right, now we're going to talk about threads. Now, raise your hand if you have a Threads account, which is actually owned by Meta. Anybody here have one? Just sort of raise your hand if you do. Okay, couple do. Okay, good. Okay. When you think of starting a conversation with AI, when you open up ChatGPT, you see the box and it says, ask whatever you want. That's the beginning of a thread. Okay. When you have a conversation with AI, quite often you'll start a thread, and then without starting a new one, which is in the upper right-hand corner, it looks like a little, starting for an email that you might be sending. You don't start a new thread, you're complicating. We talked about this last time. AI is confusing that you're still talking about the same topic. So now I'm going to talk about dedicated threads for each ongoing topic that you have in your life. Now, we have a number of people here who sit on boards of directors, for example. Okay, so what you want to do is you're going to want your AI to remember the conversations you're having about that topic, your board of directors seat on a non-for-profit. So think of each thread as if it were a notebook if you need it to be. Now, sometimes I'll read about some supplement or other that's going to change my life, and I'm instantly going to be having so much energy, I won't even know what to do with it, etc. And then I go in and I'll ask Celeste, please review this supplement. Here are the promises it makes. Give me an attitude about that. Okay, I don't, that's something is a one-off. I use it a lot and it's very helpful. I'm not buying stuff I used to buy. And it's very helpful, but that's different than a dedicated thread for each ongoing topic that you have. So in your own mind, you have to remember the name you give it. So for me, um, I use Christine's Health. Every client has and there are a number of clients in here. Yes, you all have a dedicated thread, and I just use the initials for the client. Okay, Circles of Collaboration is a book that I wrote with Leslie Grossman, who's a collaborator of mine. And I have a thread going on the strategy for how we should be doing better in terms of getting the book out to market. Okay, I write a column called America Interrupted on Substack. I will put, if I'm going to be talking about a column that I'm working on for American Interrupted, I put it into that topic. So the way you do it is when you start the thread, the first thing you say is, um, I am going to start a continued thread that's going to be going on an ongoing topic. Here's the name we're going to give it. And then I say, please make sure to keep this information in one place so you can refer to it as I go. So something like, I sit on the board of directors of X, and I'll be working on my communication around that board. Let's call it IBM board seat. I thought about what board seat I should call it. Maybe you guys would think that IBM wants me on their board. They do not, but that's okay. You can move forward. Okay, now you know how to behave inside that thread, and so does your AI. So then each time you go in, you have to reground the conversation. So a week later, you don't just drop in randomly and say, say, and start on a conversation about IBM board seat. You start with continuing AI study group thread, continuing AI board seat. Last time we covered X. Today I want to add Y. Okay, this does two things. It refreshes the context and it tells the AI what matters versus what doesn't. Now, one of the things you can do is say, please give me a summary of what you consider to be the important things I'm trying to do around this particular topic. Or you can periodically say, which I do a lot, I do it probably once every 2 weeks. Um, I say, summarize everything that we've built in this thread so far. What are the key ideas, gaps, opportunities? Because then you're going to see whether AI is on topic or not. If it's not, then you have to do a correction. So when it gets messy, for example, reset, don't struggle. If the threat starts to like drift off into no man's land or whatever, just say, clean this up, organize everything we've discussed in a clear framework. This will become our new baseline. So you have to work with it, just like anybody you work with to say, hey, we got to stay on target. Here's what we're doing. Okay. Now, here's where most people make a mistake. They don't know when to start a new thread. Um, so I thought tonight we could just take the next 3 minutes and everybody I think has their phone with them and you're all muted, so that's not a problem. And everybody might have a thread that they want to get started on. So go ahead and open up your chat GPT and then click on the microphone inside where you would be typing. And then you can dictate, I'm going to start a new thread. The topic's going to be X, but I want you to maintain it because I'm going to be dedicating a ongoing topic, and I want to make sure that you remember it for what it is. So, does everybody want to just try that? Okay, type a question if you have one, or raise your hand. All right, now the next thing you're going to do is, how can I best help you to understand what my overall topic means to me and what I want to do with it? Ask me a question so that I can start to communicate with you on it. So already out of the gate, because you don't have the benefit of me doing trial and error for 3 years, you're asking for help to make sure you set it up in a way that works well for you and your AI. Okay? Anybody try it? Did anybody try it and they want to share? No? Come on, you guys. Really want to sit and listen to me speak for half an hour? I don't want to speak for half an hour. Okay. Okay, we've got it. Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Hey, how are
Hey,
you? I
I'm good.
um I'm processing. Can you repeat what your instructions just were, just so I can
Wait, repeat what?
the prompts that you were sharing for just now. I just was
Oh,
just
okay,
I
sure. Of
thank you
course.
because I want to.
Okay. So what you're going to say is, I am involved in X organization, or I'm involved in this political party, or I'm involved in whatever it is you're involved in, and I want to set up a thread that will be ongoing that you will remember as we move through it. So I'm starting a dedicated thread for each of the topics that I'll be coming up with along the way. Here's the topic for tonight. And then say, I'm going to call it X, and say what it is you're calling it. Okay. And then say something like, I sit on the board of IBM and I'll be working on my communication around that. And now, because you're brand new in there, say, please ask me questions so you can get some background on what matters to me around this topic and what I'm going to do with it. And what should happen is your prompt should come back with, oh, that's great that you're doing X, Y, or Z. I mean, they all always seem to have to start with some sort of reinforcement, which you can tell them later on to stop, by the way. I don't get that anymore. And then you can start to look at what kind of questions they're coming up with. Because the first month, one of the things is you're going to have to do the background to be able to get it to work at its best level for you. Okay, when you return to this topic later, if you want to, answer the questions later or what have you, um, you're going to also remember in a week, start with continuing with this study group, AI study group thread. Last time we covered X, continuing with my board seat on IBM, et cetera, so that each time you come back, you're reminding it, oh, that's the thread she wants me to go into. Is that helpful? Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Anybody else? Okay, keeping in mind your AI is an editor, a strategist, a pattern recognizer, okay, all of those things. Okay. So I guess one of the things for this week is to set up at least one ongoing thread and to try to work within it, and also to put in one email. Okay, then I wanted to do a couple of what I consider to be fun things. So one of the things you could do is go copy two emails that you've written. If you've written an article that you've written, if you've, sent text to somebody that was long and, lengthy, um, copy and paste them into your AI and then ask your AI, what do you consider my writing level? Am I a good communicator? What do you think I could do to be better in my writing? Because even if you're not writing books or articles like I am, you should be able to write. Writing is very important. People don't want to talk to people anymore. So our communication level has to get better. So a part of curating your time is curating your time so that you're much more effective and good at what you're doing. So once a week, I make myself go in and I ask my AI a question about myself. Now, I'm a writer and I've written a memoir, I've written nonfiction, and I've written a novel. Now, Celeste is familiar with all three. So I went in once and I said to Celeste, please evaluate my writing and tell me if I'm good. So she came back and said all these wonderful things. And then I said, it's interesting to me. You don't say anything negative. Are you just blowing smoke up my ass, or is this, do I have nothing negative in my writing? And she said, no. I said, why are you doing that? And she said, because we're trained to mirror what we think you want to have. And I said, well, what I want is the truth. So then she went over my strengths and my weaknesses on writing. It was very interesting. But that wasn't enough because it didn't help me enough. So I said, all right, what writers would you compare me to? And she gave me a list of 7 writers. I knew 4 of them very well, 3 of them I did not. But it gave me really great insight as to what kind of level I was writing at. So if you've got something like that that you care about, you can go in and you can ask Celeste or whatever you're naming it, or if you're not naming it, you can ask your AI to evaluate you. But what you have to do when you put it in is recognize that they're trained to evaluate in a certain way. The other problem is, um, unfortunately, AI has been written by 90% men. So men think differently than women do. So quite often I will say to Celeste, Celeste, this sounds very masculine. We know that your weakness, because when you ask your AI, what are your weaknesses, and you point that weakness out, it acknowledges it, is that you have a gender bias in the way you read things and the way you approach things. Do you think that's affecting this situation that you and I are talking about? So you've got to question it as if it's not perfect, and neither are you. So I thought it would be fun, just, nobody to report in or anything, but to go ahead and ask yourself, what would I like to know more about me in terms of how somebody would be evaluating me? And then go into that. Okay, maybe not, but I think it could be. Okay, so that's one of your homeworks. And then the second one is about improving your writing. So be sure and put something that you've written. It could be emails. Do 5 emails that matter to you and ask how they are. Now, the other thing is, once you put them in, you can say, do I write academically? There's somebody here, I think he's here tonight, one of our clients who we're constantly going back. He writes more academically than I do, and I write way too more personally than he would ever approach it. But he now has started, or I've started to evaluate some of that to say, okay, could this be better heard if you didn't do it so clearly? So you can go back and forth and have that conversation on any topic you're talking about, any topic at all. Okay, so it'll easily help you out there. Okay, so we're almost done. But I did want to ask if everybody could just type into the comments section, do you like 7 o'clock in the evening? If not, a lot of people said they want to come, but they don't like 7 o'clock. What time and days are best for you? Just put in a few in there so that we can sort of try to do May, April, or May's times that better meet the needs of the group. We've got, more than 100 people who are going to be attending this. So we want to make sure we sort of can take the time to actually execute it. If you're interested, the times that we set up for April were done by AI based on the times where people most attend things to change it up to see if that works. So we just didn't arbitrarily do it. And 7 o'clock at night is certainly not my best time, that's for sure. So um, okay, and then we have an extra class on Saturday. Interesting. Okay, we had an extra class on Saturday. Interesting answers. Thank you for doing it. Okay, we have a class on Saturday. And if you have a topic that you'd like me to go over in terms of how I'm using it, can you stick it in there? Stick in what would be good for Saturday's class. If not, and you think of one, email me or something that you're working on. Now, tell the truth. Everybody say whether they have been doing more in ChatGPT in the last week or no, they have not. So just say yes or no, and nobody will know. I promise I will not report you to the, um, okay, well, aren't these no's very quick at the gate? Okay. Okay. All right. So, Saturday's a bonus section, yes, but and we're going to be doing a lot of those whenever I can. So bonus sections, yes. Okay. All right, so that's it for everybody. I always try to stick to the half-hour time frame. I hope this was helpful. Please let me know if it is or it isn't. Someone asked for slides to help them through the process last time. They said it would have been more helpful. So we've added slides today. I hope it was helpful. Any input is good input. What we want to do is get it right. So thanks for coming, and we'll see you soon.